Tonight, excessive drinking, karaoke and drink-fuelled fights. Sue Gray's report lays bare the true extent of lockdown parties at Downing Street. She says there is no excuse for some of the behaviour.
We are humbled by the experience and we have learned our lesson.
That report lays bare the rot that under this Prime Minister has spread in Number 10.
The Prime Minister continues to resist calls to resign. Those who lost loved ones during the pandemic say they're disgusted.
There is not any words for the way this man has run this whole thing. It's just absolutely rips you to the core.
Also making the headlines, an appalling betrayal of trust. A doctor who sexually abused dozens of women over 3 decades is jailed.
And are we facing a summer of rail strikes? Network Rail staff vote overwhelmingly for industrial action. I'm Vanessa Kennedy in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. It's finally been published. Sue Gray's report includes evidence of parties and drunkenness at the very heart of government, while we were all in COVID lockdowns. The civil servant says senior leadership must take the blame.
Some of the events set out by Sue Gray were attended by the Prime Minister. Boris Johnson has told MPs he takes full responsibility for what happened on his watch, but he's been resisting calls for him to quit. Well, live now to our Westminster correspondent Catherine Sampson. And Catherine, this report paints a pretty vivid picture.
It certainly does, and within its 37 pages there are all sorts of details. Details about red wine spilled up walls, details of cleaning staff and security staff being disrespected, of swings being broken, karaoke machines, of people, drinking so much they were actually sick. And perhaps more damningly, a WhatsApp message from a senior civil servant after one Bring Your Own Booze event, where he suggests we seem to have got away with it. The Prime Minister issued an apology today. He says the events he was at were necessary for work. He says he's surprised to hear what went on in the events he wasn't, and insists he did not mislead Parliament. Boris Johnson raises a beer at a birthday party thrown for him in the Cabinet Office. Pictures published for the first time in Sue Gray's report. This remains the only event the Prime Minister has been fined for. But the civil servant looked at 16, saying rules were broken at the heart of government and those at the top should take the blame. The Prime Minister was not at all the gatherings Sue Gray picked out and said should not have happened. These include a Cabinet Office event in June 2020. When the rest of us couldn't meet up inside, there was excessive drinking and someone was sick. There was also partying in the Downing Street garden before Prince Philip's funeral, where the Queen sat alone in April last year. The last person left at 4:20 a.m. Sue Gray's key conclusion: many will be dismayed that behaviour of this kind took place on this scale at the heart of government. The public have a right to expect the very highest standards of behaviour in such places, and clearly what happened fell well short of this. Jan Gillen's husband Mark died from COVID at the start of the pandemic. Sue Gray's report has reopened wounds.
It's just absolutely rips you to the core. We stayed in the house. He told us to stay at home. We did stay at home. We still die for it while he's effectively dancing on his grave. He turns my stomach. Absolutely enrages me.
Prime Minister!
In Parliament, the Prime Minister took responsibility for events on his watch, but played down personal involvement.
And I have been as surprised and disappointed as anyone else in this House as the revelations have unfolded. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, I have been appalled by some of the behaviour. We are humbled by the experience, and we have learned our lesson.
That report lays bare the rot that under this Prime Minister has spread in Number 10. And it provides definitive proof of how those within the building treated the sacrifices of the British people with utter contempt.
The Prime Minister was engaging in drinking and debauchery that makes a mockery of the gut-wrenching sacrifices that each and every person made. Will the Prime Minister now take the opportunity and resign?
Outside Sterling's party shop, it was hard to find people satisfied with the Prime Minister's apologies.
Tories have to call him out. I've just been sitting listening to PMQs and he's still sitting there lying.
Ridiculous.
I want to move on now, so I think that there's other more important things that we need to be talking about than that.
I think he's a right clown, to be honest with you.
Boris Johnson hopes the country now moves on from Partygate. It seems he's staying put, but he remains the first Prime Minister to break the law while in office. Catherine Sampson, STV News, Westminster.
Well, our political editor Colin Mackay joins us now. And Colin, what did you make of it?
This is a damning report. The Prime Minister apologised to the Commons for the umpteenth time today. He said several times that he felt this was a humbling report, a humbling experience for him. Well, for more reaction to today's events, I'm joined by the Scottish Conservative leader, Douglas Ross. Mr Ross, you used to think he should go. What do you think today?
Well, I think the report is very damaging. It outlines many of the issues that we already knew about, but there's new pictures and there is new information. I think one of the worst things in the report that's new is the way junior staff were treated in Downing Street. Cleaners and security officers absolutely disrespected, and it's right that the Prime Minister has apologised for that and everything else in the report, because people are rightly still very angry about this.
So do you think he should resign then?
Well, I've said the situation in Ukraine changes things for me, and since the conclusion of Sue Gray's report, that situation has not resolved itself. Indeed, just yesterday, President Zelensky was speaking about how we need more support from Western allies, and of course the UK has been one of the strongest allies singled out by President Zelensky.
So you're giving him a
support.
free pass because of the war in Ukraine?
It's not a free pass, but I do think it's a serious issue that we have to have in context with this. It doesn't take away from the report, what's been said, and the anger that the public have. And I understand people won't all agree with my position, but I do believe that the situation in Ukraine is absolutely vital. And
as long as that remains the situation in Ukraine, you back him?
Well, I've said removing a Prime Minister while we continue to support these efforts in Ukraine would only destabilise our efforts and the people of Ukraine, and that would only help Vladimir Putin.
So you could be stuck with him for the next election even though you don't really want him?
Well, you know, I hope the situation in Ukraine is resolved as quickly as possible. But
and if it is, would you want him to go before the election?
But we're not in that situation.
But if it was, would you want him to go before the election?
These are hypotheticals, but we are in a situation where the war has now been going for several months, and just yesterday, President Zelensky was looking at what was happening in Mariupol. You know, further destruction there, more bombing. The Russian forces are getting stronger in areas where the Ukrainians are still trying to push them back and destabilising the UK government. I'd like to trust a Conservative Prime Minister, and on issues such as Ukraine and on the vaccine rollout and others, I do trust him, but he has serious questions to answer on this, and the Privileges Committee will now look at that.
Douglas Ross, thanks for joining us on the STV News. Well, we've seen in the report today drunken behaviour, parties at Number 10 Downing Street, demeaning security and cleaning staff, and also a key line in the report today from a senior civil servant in Boris Johnson's office saying it seems like we got away with it. That's what it seems like today, but there is a lot more on this to come, because there is a further report, a further investigation due from a Westminster Committee inquiry.
And Colin, you are in Holyrood, where Nicola Sturgeon should be celebrating becoming the longest serving First Minister.
Well, the Scottish Government was supposed to be unveiling its independence plans today and throughout this week, but the First Minister is off sick. She's got COVID. You can tell she's off sick because she's not even tweeted for a couple of days. But 7.5 years into her premiership, she's still remarkably popular. She's probably won more elections than any other Scottish leader, but she's now facing questions about delivery, not just on the ferries. The biggest question of delivery is on another independence referendum. Can she do that? And as Bernard Ponsonby, my colleague, writes on the STV News website, Nicola Sturgeon's legacy has yet to be written.
Colin in Holyrood, thank you. A doctor convicted of sex offences against dozens of women over more than 3 decades has been jailed for 12 years. The judge told Krishna Singh his serial offending was calculated and manipulative. His victims included pregnant women, a rape survivor and teenage girls.
Following the conviction, more patients have made complaints about the Lanarkshire GP, prompting calls for a full public inquiry into why his behaviour wasn't detected sooner. Our chief reporter Sharon Frew was in court.
Once a respected and trusted family doctor, prosecutors say Krishna Singh was a sexual predator hiding in plain sight. Under the guise of carrying out medical examinations, the GP's offending continued throughout his 35-year career.
These women suffered at his hands. They should have been able to go to their doctor, expect to be treated with dignity and respect. He abused his position of trust and subjected them to some horrific sexual abuse, from touching and groping to more serious, intimate examinations that were entirely inappropriate. I think because he'd been doing it for so long and over such a number of years that he had normalised his behaviour.
The 72-year-old was found guilty of 54 sex offences against 47 female patients in various medical settings. These included GP practices in Coatbridge, an accident and emergency department and a police station where he examined victims of sexual violence.
Often in my experience, people's motivation in reporting is to stop it happening to someone else, and it can be so difficult to report a crime like this, particularly against somebody that they say has been in a powerful position. So I really commend everyone that had the courage to come forward and take part in really what's been a horrendous case.
Patients have told STV News of the measures they took to try and avoid the doctor. One would make their medication last longer, another attempted to use the out-of-hours service instead, while some took relatives along to their appointments. Victim impact statements given to the judge detail the ongoing debilitating and devastating consequences for 15 patients. The women said they suffer both emotional and psychological scarring and have a continued mistrust of the medical profession. NHS Lanarkshire said Singh's actions had been a total abuse of the patient-doctor relationship. A number of women now intend to take civil action.
There are questions that must be asked as to how did this happen? How was it allowed to happen for so long? Why were complaints that were raised before 2018 ignored? And it seems that the only way to do that is a full public inquiry to understand exactly what has happened and make sure it does not happen again.
Singh has been sentenced to 12 years in prison and placed on the sex offenders register for an indefinite period. Since his conviction, 4 more women have made complaints to police about his behaviour. Sharon Frew, STV News.
Passengers could face a summer of travel misery after Network Rail staff voted overwhelmingly in support of strike action. The union, RMT, says it believes job cuts and inadequate pay rises are being used to cover the costs of the pandemic.
It plans to cause major disruption to services in the coming weeks unless there is change. Well, our reporter Caroline Lewis is at Central Station for us now. And Caroline, what does this mean for travellers?
Well, as you can see, I'm probably here quite a busy and bustling station at the moment, but that is set to change in the coming weeks. We haven't got the full details, but RMT have confirmed that this strike will involve all Network Rail staff. So that's all the people that run and maintain the railway infrastructure. So inevitably, this is going to have a huge impact across services in what could be the biggest strike we've seen in decades. Well, I spoke to union reps earlier today, and they say this isn't what they wanted, but as far as they see it, they've been left no choice.
Rail workers are sick to the back teeth of actually getting treated with absolutely contempt, attacking the jobs, terms and the conditions, and in particularly no pay rise for the valuable recognition that rail workers gave during the height of the pandemic is just not acceptable.
Now, on the other side of the negotiating table is employer Network Rail. They say RMT have jumped the gun, and any industrial action now would be disastrous for the industry's recovery, but could also stop them from awarding those pay rises that the unions are calling for. But let's not forget, this isn't the only rail dispute on the table, as RMT and union ASLEF are also in a pay dispute with ScotRail. Now, that hasn't been balloted yet, but if that gives the go-ahead, those strikes could affect, will specifically target Edinburgh Festival. So it could be a very difficult and long summer ahead for rail passengers.
Caroline at Glasgow Central, thank you. The sister of a murdered man has told STV News criminals have more rights than victims in Scotland after she ran into her brother's killer at a funeral without being told he was back in the community.
John McAvoy was sentenced to 15 years in jail for murdering Tony Blair in 2006. But in 2019, he started working in a local hotel without the family being notified. Leslie's now calling for a change in the law and has spoken exclusively to our political reporter, Laura Alderman.
He was the life and soul of the party, a big gentle giant. He would do anything for absolutely anybody.
In 2006, Leslie's brother Tony was asleep in bed with his then girlfriend when her jealous ex set fire to their house in Airdrie. She managed to escape, but Tony did not.
A man who started a fire in his ex-girlfriend's flat in Falkirk, which killed her boyfriend, has been found guilty of his murder and her attempted murder.
His killer, John McAvoy, was sentenced to a minimum of 15 years in prison. But it wasn't the last that Leslie would see of him.
In 2019, he was given licence to go out and work on placement in a hotel. And we found out before the prison service told us. He was at his mother's funeral and I seen him there with no security, no prison guards, on his own. So again, not told, let down, absolutely shattered and brought everything back again.
Leslie is now calling for a change in the law to make sure victims and their families are told when a perpetrator is back in the local community.
It's as if Tony doesn't exist anymore, and it's as if his death didn't affect any of the rest of us. My husband's never met Tony, only sees pictures. My little girl hasn't met Tony. She's been denied an uncle. There just needs to be more transparency with the justice system.
She's backing MSP Jamie Green's bill to increase the rights of victims.
I want to ensure that victims have a say in pro-hearings. I want to ensure that they have communication with the justice system and they are afforded every right and voice that they deserve, because ultimately they are the victims of crime, not the offenders. And that's something that's been forgotten far too often in Scottish justice.
The Scottish Government says it will consider the details of any legislative proposals carefully. Leslie has managed to forgive her brother's killer and now just wants to move on with her life, making sure other victims like her are protected. Laura Alderman, STV News.
A police officer has told an inquiry that he thought Sheku Bayo had killed his colleague. PC Ashley Tomlinson was describing the moments after he arrived on a street in Kirkcaldy following reports of a man carrying a knife.
The officer also told the inquiry that he'd feared another colleague had been slashed in the face. The hearings in Edinburgh are exploring events surrounding the death of 31-year-old Mr Bayo in May 2015. Kay Nicholson reports.
PC Ashley Tomlinson says he saw Sheku Bayo do this to his colleague PC Nicole Short as she lay on the ground. He claims Mr Bayo punched her in the head just seconds before.
I thought he killed her.
PC Tomlinson also demonstrated hitting Mr Bayo with a baton.
I struck him in the head area. It didn't cause him to turn around, and my fear was that he was going to do it again. So I didn't want to gamble on the what if. So I delivered 2 more strikes, and that was enough to cause him to basically turn around and look at me and do that.
He described seeing his colleague PC Craig Walker tackle Mr Bayo.
He just seemed to appear for me out of nowhere. It was kind of like a grab or something like that. It appeared to be a grab, but something that would cause Mr Bayo to be off balance and push him from where he was standing and cause like a stumbling sort of motion.
Earlier, PC Tomlinson said he'd been concerned about PC Walker when he first arrived.
And the first thing I seen him do was that.
What did you think?
My initial thought, given the number of the calls in relation to a knife, was that PC Walker had been slashed to the face.
And had you seen a knife in the possession of Mr Bayo?
I couldn't assume the number of calls. He could have had it concealed.
So you hadn't seen one? You're shaking your head, right?
Mr Bayo, a father of 2, died after being restrained by officers. The inquiry before Lord Brackadale is exploring what happened in the lead-up to his death. It continues tomorrow. Kay Nicholson, STV News, Edinburgh.
The People's Palace and Glasshouse will be restored. That's the promise from the new boss at Glasgow Life. Susan Dean also says the newly refurbished Burrell collection is getting more visitors than they'd hoped. She sat down with our reporter Laura Boyd to talk about her vision for the city.
Oh, it looks fabulous, yeah. Even the entrance coming in, all the new pathways, it's really accessible.
It's lovely to be able to enjoy these things again. It's important for everyone, no matter where they come from and what their circumstances, to be able to enjoy art and architecture.
It's just wonderful, and everybody loves it, so it's great.
Glowing reviews for the Burrell collection, and in the first couple of months since it reopened, it's proved a popular draw.
In our first 50 days, we've welcomed 124,000 people through the doors. That's incredible. We always expect to get large numbers in at the beginning, but this has surpassed our expectations, especially if you think about where we are, coming out of COVID. So that just shows you the love, the affection, the excitement that the Burrell has created in Glasgow.
Well, it's good news for the Burrell collection. Here at the People's Palace, citizens are keen to know what plans are in place to secure the future of this building. And in her newly appointed role as CEO of Glasgow Life, this is one of the key issues on Susan's agenda.
Well, the People's Palace is open. Please go on down there and have a look at our exhibits. But we're really excited about the People's Palace because we are working with the City Council on funding bids as we speak. And we're also going to be speaking to local people from later on this week and throughout June, asking for their feedback on the exhibits. We talk about the People's Palace and Winter Gardens. It is one building. So I think there's a real opportunity to look at it as one building and make sure that it is accessible, it's inclusive, but it's sustainable. So we're really committed to the People's Palace and Winter Gardens reopening, and we're working on it already. I have to say, Laura, I'm a Glaswegian. I love Glasgow. I'm passionate about it. So my focus is on getting out there and getting the people back into our venues and getting visitors back into the city.
Laura Boyd, STV News.
Straight to the sport now with Sheila.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Now, Olympic champion Duncan Scott believes this week's Glasgow International meet could be crucial for Team Scotland in the build-up to the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. The event at Tollcross Swimming Centre gets underway on Friday, and with the World Championships in Budapest coming up next month, it's an important time for the University of Stirling swimmer.
Out with the diving, it's the full aquatics team together, and I think it's going to be the first chance we really get to, I don't really want to say bond, but I guess, really properly meet each other, get those relationships started, whether it's just simply having meals or simple team exercises as well. So that'll be the first thing, but then also for World Championships, refining skills, seeing what I'm like under pressure.
Football now, and Trevor Carson says his move to St Mirren ticks all the boxes after signing from Dundee United for an undisclosed fee. The Northern Irishman, who arrives as a replacement for Jack Anick, will be reunited with former boss Stephen Robinson in Paisley. Well, the Buddies have been drawn to play Championship runners-up Arbroath in the group stage of the League Cup. Airdrieonians, Edinburgh City and Cowdenbeath are also in Group E. Newly promoted Kilmarnock have been drawn in a group with Partick Thistle, Montrose, Stenhousemuir and Fraserburgh. The full draw is on the STV Sport website. Scotland international Caroline Weir is leaving Manchester City this summer. The 26-year-old, who's been linked with a move to Real Madrid, won 4 trophies in as many years during her spell at City and scored 38 times in 124 appearances. Women's football chief Aileen Campbell believes there are lots of positive signs for the game in Scotland ahead of this weekend's Scottish Cup final. Glasgow City and Celtic go head-to-head in the final at Tynecastle on Sunday, and Campbell believes the competitive nature of this season's tournaments bodes well for the future.
Rangers won the league, that broke the kind of 14-year spell of dominance from Glasgow City. Celtic won a title at the end of the year, and now we've got Celtic and Glasgow City again in the final. But they're not there by just through going through the motions. They were put up against it by both Partick Thistle and Hearts. Again, they kind of raised their game, they pushed the teams hard, and I think it shows that there is real signs of strength across the league, across many teams, and real signs of optimism and positivity for football and for women's football going forward.
Finally, some rugby news, and Glasgow Warriors have bolstered their pack by signing South African forward Sintu Manjesi for next season. The 27-year-old second rower will make the switch to Scotstoun from United Rugby Championship rivals, the Vodacom Bulls. That's all the sport from me for this evening.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
And now Philip has your weather forecast.
Watch out for a sudden temperature drop. TUI Blue Hotels, sponsor STV Weather.
Well, as we head through the rest of this evening and overnight, already we're into a mixture of clear spells and further scattered blustery showers feeding in from the west. Some of those could be quite heavy to begin with, but then through the early hours of tomorrow morning, they start to become confined mostly to western areas. For southern and eastern parts, a drier night to come. Where we've got the clear skies, we could see temperatures getting down to around 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, but for all areas it will be cooler than we've seen recently, down into single figures. Looking ahead to tomorrow, a fresher feeling start to the day. We've got a waving frontal system making its way eastwards across the UK. That's mostly affecting parts of England and Northern Ireland. Here, from around Oban to Dundee southwards, it does bring with it outbreaks of rain through the morning. By 11 o'clock, though, that will have cleared away. And for the rest of the afternoon, we're into a mixture of sunny spells and further blustery showers. Now, these showers will be more frequent than we've seen today, and also will be quite heavy. So we could hear the odd rumble of thunder and see some hail. Temperature-wise, reaching highs of around 14 or 15 degrees Celsius, but we've still got strong winds, so if we factor in the wind chill, it will be feeling a lot cooler. Looking ahead to Friday now, things start to take a bit of a change. We've got high pressure building from the southwest. We're in a northwesterly airflow, so further showers across the north and west. Elsewhere, drier day with some sunny spells. Bye-bye.
TUI Blue Hotels, sponsor STV Weather.
And that's all from us for this evening.
From all of us, thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Bye.